Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. This is from Hooperazzi on Twitter, who is an Indiana fan, and he asked me, he says, who is going to be the next basketball coach at Indiana? It's the $1 million question right now. It's maybe the $8 million question right now, because that's what Mike Woodson's current buyout is. And I think about Indiana, first of all, as you can see on the bottom of the screen, make sure to follow our Torres on Indiana account, Torres on Indiana. By the way, if we have any Indiana students see this video, we need some social media help. If you want an internship opportunity, you can email me, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions @gmail.com. With that said, let's talk Indiana. Hooperazzi, who is the next basketball coach in Indiana? So first off, I'll say this. I was a little surprised how hard the national media went at Mike Woodson after the game on Tuesday. Usually, I'm the guy that's out on a limb saying stuff that's unpopular. Shout out Zach Edey a year ago when I was 4 months ahead of that narrative. But I bring it up because Indiana, it felt like the second that they lost in the manner that they did. By the way, I got an itch in my nose here. I apologize. It's allergy season, so I apologize. Okay, Indiana. Focus on Indiana. Focus on Indiana, Torres. Pay attention. Okay, so I was surprised at how many people on the national scale really went after Woodson and basically said, this is it. Now, I happen to agree, but to me, it was a little bit surprising. Usually people are hesitant to kind of have strong opinions, hesitant to burn sources, hesitant to do this. And everybody was just like, no, he's done. He ain't coming back. And so the question becomes, who's next? Now, first of all, money's not going to be an issue. So I looked into Woodson's buyout. He does have an $8 million buyout. It can be paid out $1 million a year over 8 years if what I read was correct. So basically they're paying him $1 million a year. That's a retirement nest egg. He's going to be fine. But they also don't have to break the bank. This isn't like you got to spend $20 million to buy him out, and then where do you get the money for everything else? So they're going to be able to pay the buyout. It's going to happen. And I think the big question that becomes clear to me is basically like, can you get a big name at another school to leave a big job to take your job? And I've said this for years. I think we are increasingly getting to a point where it's harder and harder to get big names to leave big jobs for other big jobs, even blue blood type jobs. If you believe Indiana's a blue blood, that's a whole nother conversation. Okay. You look at Kentucky last year. They called Scott Drew. Scott Drew listened, didn't leave. Dan Hurley didn't even pick up the phone call from Kentucky. Go back a few years ago. Arizona is one of the best jobs in college basketball. They hired an assistant off Gonzaga and Tommy Lloyd. He's been great. But it's not easy to get guys out of good jobs for other jobs. But I don't think that means that you shouldn't make phone calls. And I don't think that means that Indiana is incapable of getting a big name coach. Want to get to a few of them. The first one, producer Matt, I did not give you, but somebody brought this up, and I think it's a great point. Dusty May was the hot candidate a year ago. He was at Florida Atlantic, and everybody knew last year was the year he was probably leaving for a big-time job. Well, I bring it up because even a year ago, Indiana fans wanted the school to fire Mike Woodson to go get Dusty May. And they basically said, like, look, if you have a chance to go get an Indiana alum, for people who don't remember, we talked about it on the show on Wednesday. Dusty May is an Indiana alum, was not an assistant, but he was a student manager under Bobby Knight. He has ties to the school. And so everybody said a year ago, it's like, oh, you got to go get Dusty May. They don't. He goes to Michigan. Now, to be clear, I don't think he's leaving Michigan after 1 year, but I've had a lot of Indiana fans bring up the fact to me that his buyout is actually pretty low and pretty manageable. And so if he wants the Indiana job, if he's willing to leave after 1 year, he is actually a relatively attainable candidate. By the way, for people who don't follow college basketball or Big Ten basketball on a day-to-day basis, it is worth noting, by the way, Michigan is awesome this year. Michigan is currently 5-0 in the Big Ten. They do play on Thursday night at Minnesota. So by the time you see this, maybe they took a loss. I don't think that they will, but there's a possibility to take the loss. But 13-3 right now, 5-0 in the Big Ten. They're playing really well. And all of a sudden, he is not unattainable just because of the fact that buyout is relatively manageable. So that's probably the first call. Now, would he take it? Would he leave Michigan after 1 year? The big narrative at this time last year was that he really didn't want one of those fishbowl jobs where, basketball is the focus 365 days a year. One, maybe it's different because it's Indiana, his alma mater. Two, kind of worth noting, Indiana's kind of good at football right now, so maybe you don't have as much of a spotlight as you expected. That's the first phone call I think you have to make. I don't know if he would leave. Two, I think the other phone call you have to make, will it happen? Probably not. I think you got to at least call Bruce Pearl, right? And this might sound crazy. People sit there and say, why would Bruce Pearl leave Auburn? Well, just remember, Bruce Pearl, first head coaching job was at Southern Indiana. He was an assistant at Iowa. He has actually spent a fair amount of time in Big Ten country, also coached at UW Milwaukee. Now, with that said, do I think he's leaving Auburn? I don't. First off, we got to remember, like I just said, I think Auburn's going to the Final Four at minimum. I think they're playing until the last week in March, the first week in April, okay? And Indiana cannot wait that long to get a head coach with the portal the way that it is. I know the portal opens a little bit later this year. It does not matter. You cannot wait until April 8th to hire a coach. And that's assuming that you can get Bruce Pearl, and I don't think you can. Bruce Pearl is 60, but he's going to be 65 years old. I don't think he's leaving. I don't think that, if he's coming off of a Final Four or national championship, there's no way Auburn lets him leave. And I think he's retiring at Auburn at this point. Now, listen, I know there's some talk about Auburn hasn't allowed him to make his son the coach in waiting. I promise you, if they're about to lose Bruce Pearl, they're going to figure out a way to make that happen, make a way to get it done. So I love Bruce Pearl. I think you should call Bruce Pearl. I don't think he would take it. Next name that I would absolutely call. Would he take it? I don't know. And I don't know that they will because of some background stuff. I would call Chris Beard. And it's kind of crazy because I was thinking about this. One of the first months that this YouTube channel blew up was March and April of 2021. And that was the last time that the Indiana coaching job opened up. Now, it's not technically opened up yet, but it's going to open up. And even at the time, you can find videos of me saying, go get Chris Beard, stop screwing around, okay? Now, things have changed. Chris Beard, of course, went through that legal situation at Texas. It is worth noting that all charges were dropped, but I know that he might not be the cup of tea for everybody that everybody's looking for. But at the end of the day, if you're an Indiana fan, don't you just want to win? Aren't you just tired of getting your brains beat in? And credit Chris Beard, man, the guy wins everywhere. He won at Texas Tech, went to a Final Four. I think it's easy to forget this now. The year he got fired at Texas, they were number one in the country. Like, they were the number one team in the country. Last year at Ole Miss struggled a little bit, but we've talked about it on the show. He brought back Mark Adams, his kind of defensive guru. Now they're again one of the best defensive teams in the country. And I think the other variable with Chris Beard, one, he's coached all over the country. You kind of think of him as a Texas guy, but he was a JUCO guy in the Midwest, coached in Texas, coached now in Mississippi. The other thing is, I think he's going to take it. Like, Bruce Pearl, I think, is retiring at Auburn. Dusty May, I don't really think he's going to leave. Chris Beard, I think, is about ready. I don't want to say about ready. I think he would leave for the right opportunity. I'll tell you this. Don't tell anybody. I think he was ready to take the Arkansas job last year, and I think Hunter Yurachek kind of dropped the bag. And so I don't think he's a lifer at Ole Miss. That's a really tough job in the SEC with the current state of things that it is. That's not one of the best jobs in the SEC. He's doing a great job, but it's not an easy job to win at. I think he would take Indiana if they really went after him. That's a name that I would consider. Another name I would consider, certainly got a little bit of baggage right now, Florida coach Todd Golden. So Todd Golden, a young guy, 39 years old. He's at Florida. Now, it is worth noting, he is going through it's more of a school investigation. I wouldn't necessarily call it a legal situation right now, but he's going through a school investigation right now. I think it's certainly possible that he is unhireable. But the counter to that is, as I've said from the beginning, I'm not saying listen, I don't have any inside information. I don't believe Florida would be dumb enough to let him be coaching right now if they truly believed that everything that had been said about him was 100% accurate. And so he is coaching. The team is awesome. And a couple of things worth noting. One, they're going to lose a bunch of guys off this year's team after this season. Elijah Martin's in his last year. Walter Clayton's in his last year. Two, he's really good. Like, I've said it a million times, is I didn't like the hire when it happened. I got to take the L. I love kind of, he has the analytics side to him, but he's got the recruiting chops and he's raised NIL money. And he's going to the SEC and he's competing in the deep end with the big fish. Okay. He ain't backing down from Rick Barnes, who he just beat. He ain't backing down from John Calipari, who he just beat. And so you think about him. The other thing, remember, he's got ties everywhere as well. He's not just I'm a Southeast guy. You look at started his career. He's from Arizona, played at St. Mary's, coached at San Francisco, coached at Auburn. Now he's at Florida. So has ties all over. I don't think he's tied to Florida for the rest of his career. And the one thing I think will be kind of worth tracking over the next couple years, some of these SEC coaches, the SEC is such a gauntlet right now. Do some guys try to get out of the SEC to maybe the ACC, the Big Ten, because it's just so hard to win right now? And I'm not saying people are soft or people are afraid. I'm not saying this is a Lincoln Riley situation when Oklahoma was leaving for the SEC. But I just wonder, like if you got a chance to take one of the 2 or 3 best jobs in the Big Ten, or you're in the middle to the bottom of the SEC with the way the SEC is going, with the fact that Auburn's rolling and Kentucky's rolling with Pope and whatever, I think you have to at least consider it. Which brings me to another name that I think is at least worth making a phone call to, Chris Jans at Mississippi State. Listen, Mississippi State's one of those, that's got to be one of the 2 or 3 toughest jobs in the SEC. I know everybody's got NIL money in the SEC, but probably not quite the same at Mississippi State as most other places. And I think he's doing about as well as you can. They're currently in the top 15, sitting at 14-3. They have lost 2 straight to Kentucky at home, at Auburn. And I think that kind of shows you kind of the cap of what you're really capable of at Mississippi State. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm not trying to be mean-spirited. It is a tough place to win. And it's a tough place to sustain winning in this era where everybody in the SEC has money. Everybody is winning at a high level. It's just a really tough situation. So I would go ahead and give him a call. I would see what he's interested in. By the way, he has Big Ten area ties as well, coached at Bowling Green for 1 year. Now, like so many other guys on this list, he's got checkered past is not really so much of it, but you can Google why he had to leave Bowling Green or why he was excused from Bowling Green, if you will. But I just bring it up because he does have ties to the Midwest. He had success there, won at New Mexico State. Now he's winning at Mississippi State. I think it'd be crazy if you didn't give him a phone call, assuming that you don't hit on one of the other ones. Really quickly, I think realistically, we have to be honest and say that, again, high-profile coaches in high-profile leagues are not really leaving even good jobs for potentially great jobs like Indiana. So you start to look at the mid-major ranks. The other guy that immediately comes to mind, and I think it's one that I think even Indiana fans are kind of like, this might be the guy that ends up making the most sense. But Ben McCollum, who is the head coach currently at Drake. Okay, yeah, let's do the old cliche Drake joke. Started from the bottom, now he's at Indiana, baby. But let me explain why. This is a guy. This is kind of a crazy stat. He's a young guy, by the way. He's 43 years old. He'll be 44 in April. He won 4 national championships at the D2 level. Was kind of picky on when am I going to go up to D1, this, that, the other thing. Well, he goes to Drake this year. In year 1, he's 15-2. He basically took a bunch of D2 guys with him, and all he's done is won. Beat Miami, beat Vandy, by the way. Vandy's a good team. Beat Kansas State early in the out-of-conference portion of the slate. Now he is currently sitting in first place in the Missouri Valley. So listen, people have been waiting for this guy to come to the D1 level. He is there. He is having success. That is a name that, listen, I would go after the Bruce Pearls, the Chris Beards, but if they say no, I wouldn't hesitate to jump on this guy because he's going to be at the high major level here soon. I think he's probably a name worth calling.